All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm David Solomon. In addition to being the Director of Research and Creative Activity at Christopher Newport University in Virginia, I am the current chair of the Undergraduate Research Programs Division of CUR. And I want to welcome you back to this year's Undergraduate Research Program Exchanges. These 50-minute Zoom sessions are monthly facilitated exchanges of ideas and information on a variety of topics and issues related to undergraduate research programs. Sessions are recorded, made available on the CUR community, the CUR URP website, and will be sent out to everyone who has pre-registered. These exchanges are not designed to be formal presentations, but instead will begin with very brief introductions by facilitators and then open for discussion. Today's session addresses a topic that seems to be on everyone's table at the moment: artificial intelligence in and undergraduate research. We're fortunate to have colleagues representing two institutions to facilitate the discussion. First, I'll ask our guests to introduce themselves and then speak a few minutes about their practices and the slides that we have, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussions. So let me get my slides shared here. There we go. So Sherry, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Sherry Mattis, and I am a librarian at Christopher Newport University. I'm currently head of circulation here, but I have a lot of past experience with being an instruction librarian. I still do instruction where I'm currently at now, and I recently worked with David Solomon on an AI project for undergraduate research, and so my interest in this topic is something that we talk about regularly at our institution.
And Stephanie?
Hello and good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ramos. I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Undergraduate Research at Oregon State University, located in Corvallis. And this topic is very interesting and exciting as our university has strongly adapted AI and the use of AI in our courses. And so I'm happy to be part of the conversation with you all today.
And I am the third facilitator, and I've been working on issues related to AI pretty intensely for about the last year. And as you'll see as we go through here, I don't think any of us have necessarily drunk the Kool-Aid. This is to be a discussion about what this is all about. If you think we have the magic wands and you registered for this thinking we're going to get all the answers, you're not. We don't have the magic wands. We have wands, but I think occasionally, I don't know about my colleagues, but I feel like sometimes I hit myself in the head with the wand instead of actually making it functional. We also don't have the fairy dust to sprinkle over this to make it all go away. That is not going to happen either. But I always start out the discussion by saying, we are not debating whether this is the savior of all mankind or the end of the world. Is it an angel? Is it a devil? We don't know, and that's really not what we're talking about here. And so as a result, what we're going to do is kind of give you an overview of the issues that are involved in developing a statement about the use of AI. One of the things that some of us have run into is students who think that, well, they can use these AI platforms and that's research, isn't it now? Um, it's the same shift that we had when we moved from the old way of doing things with the physical card catalog in the library to using all of the online databases. And I always tell students, you've got to get into the library. You can't just sit in your room in your pajamas. You can't do all of your research from there. It really probably will not work. I've put a link into the chat. And there they are. It's the same link. If you have a current AI institutional, programmatic, or even a syllabus statement and you'd like to share it, you certainly can go to that link and drop that into the Google Doc, and we will share that with everyone as well, with an effort to try and to help, which is the whole point of these exchanges. So I will start off by talking about the first of the issues, and I think we have 5 or 6 to cover. The first one is academic integrity and authorship, right? So obviously there's a question about plagiarism and originality. As you no doubt have read, there is not a plagiarism checker that can check AI that is actually effective. If you plug something into one and plug it into another checker, you're going to get two different results. My daughter just had that. She had a paper submitted for a grad course she's taking. The professor is adamant about no use of AI and said that she will use a checker. And of course, my daughter, who's paranoid about it, even though she would never do anything like that, went and put it into three different checkers herself and got three different answers about whether or not she had used AI. So it is a problem. Transparency, right? It's still a little bit unclear how to cite AI contributions in research. The main players, APA, MLA, Chicago, are developing ways, and you have to look online in order to find them because they're not in their print manuals yet, because this is so new. But that is obviously an important part of this. And then the authorship problem. Who owns this, right? The IP issue. Who owns the work that's co-produced with AI? Is it the student? Is the AI tools creator? There are many journal platforms now that explicitly say that AI cannot be listed as a co-author, which, seems like to me as a humanist, a duh moment, but there they have to say it. And so as a result, that becomes an issue as well. I'm just putting this link into the chat again. There you go. Okay. Sherry.
Okay, so I will be talking about critical thinking and skill development a little bit. And some of the things that we seem to be worried about is the loss of skills, right? If students are going to over rely on AI. And some of the thoughts that come to mind when I think of this is we've always had other tools that have kind of replaced other skills. If we think about Google and we think about now we have browser extensions to tell us the validity of information or sites. And information literacy has always expanded to include these new things. We have digital literacy and media literacy and visual literacy, and now we have AI literacy. But yet, what we can do, that recent study that came out, this was one of the things we discussed amongst ourselves the other day, was your brain on Chat GPT, which came out of MIT. I think before we get really, really nervous about anything, it is still a preprint. It was a very small number of participants, and I think we just don't know yet. One of the positive things I think that we can focus on is that, we are at the point right now that we can define how we want to use AI in our classrooms, how we want it used in our disciplines, how we want it used in our assignments. And I think that those are the things we have to think about as we think about what we may be losing. Will we lose traditional searching skills with controlled vocabulary? Maybe, I don't know. Will we lose creative inquiry and analysis of information if we rely too heavily on AI? Are we losing some soft skills? Are we losing writer's voice is a big one. And that scholarly conversation where we build on other people's works, if we don't know where we're getting our information from, we could be losing that also. But I think if disciplines define what they want is as a mandatory skill developing for their discipline, we can work those into our assignments. And then we can find ways to make sure that they're learning those things, and the assessment will align with that, and we won't lose that either. One of the other things I think that's really important in this AI literacy with our thinking and critical thinking skills is, from a librarian's perspective especially, is slow down and understand what we're looking at. Everything now we're viewing in a digital context, and students have a hard time determining what is it? Is it a blog? Is it a scholarly article? Is it a magazine article? And the context matters. I think if we have those conversations about the nuances of the quality of sources and the context and the kinds of publishing that are available in 2025, which has been very democratizing versus the traditional way of publishing, and and the tools and the way that they deliver information and deliver it perhaps with bias. And I think we need to have these kinds of conversations. And that way we can let AI into the research process without actually losing the human in the process.
And I just want to remind people, encourage you to put comments and questions into the chat, and we will get to them. I think Sherry, you're still up with the next slide.
Yeah, so data ethics and privacy is a really big one. And all of the things that are mentioned on the slide are super important. Some of the thoughts that I had when I was thinking about this is, we always have the corporate role in AI where they're operating these tools for profit, and either financial profit. Politicians are using them for impacting elections. We've seen that in the past. We've seen collection of data without authorization. And then they use big data to track everything and link everything together. The second thing is the bad actors and the data breaches, right? That's something that's not new. But with AI, I think by connecting everything and AI generated malware now, it's just so, it's just invading every aspect of our lives. But the one thing that I think that we can really, really focus on with our students is, as consumers, I think people are so willing to give their information. And we have all done it, including myself, where how many times has something popped up and you just accept the terms of use just so that you can move on and you don't actually use it. I think by slowing students down and talking about what they lose when they say yes, what does the tool say other terms of use? Like, I think we don't read these lots of times, but I think if we don't start reading them, especially as we select AI tools to use, we're going to lose more and more of our personal information for efficiency. And I think we have to be really, really careful with that. There's some new initiatives that just recently are happening. They're talking again about a national health data tracking system in the United States, and they're bringing in a lot of corporate partnerships, what always makes me nervous, because that data tracking with apps sharing information, it's good. It will erode our privacy. And then the other more recent one also was the EU just started collecting biometrics in order to enter the countries that belong to the EU if you're a non-member, and they're going to save that data. And so I think that by discussing these kinds of things with students, it will hopefully get them to think a little bit more and to protect their own data privacy.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges there is for students who are doing research, and if they upload a data set to Gemini or Anthropic or one of those, I don't think they're fully aware that they are basically adding that data set now to the larger AI platform and making that information public, which, as we say in that first point there on this slide, may violate FERPA. It may violate IRB. There could be a lot of violations involved, and they're not really aware of that. Okay. Steph.
Hi there. Sorry. I'm also recovering from a cold, so I appreciate if you'll give me grace with my voice. But we're also looking at methodological validation. So we know, excuse me, AI is transforming research, but it's not doing so without a lot of complications. So some of the concerns that we discussed, and I really appreciate David's work for putting this presentation together, is thinking about these opaque algorithms. So many AI models, including ChatGPT and other image generators, operate as black boxes, and researchers and just basic people cannot see what or understand how these processes are working, how they're making the decisions that they're making behind the scenes. And this creates a lack of transparency, and it makes it really difficult to understand or assess how these outputs are generated. It's almost impossible to replicate the results. If you and I both put in the same prompt into our generators, we're going to get very different answers. And so that means there's inconsistency across different use cases. There's also inaccuracy and hallucinations. So AI tools, if you've used them, can generate false and misleading information. This is what they call hallucinations. So what this means is you might put in or ask a prompt, you be doing this for research, and it can give you fabricated sources or citations. It invents data because it's pulling from so many different places. It also can misrepresent some facts. This is where it becomes really important to have a human. The model that I've heard is sandwich, so human AI human, having that kind of bookend of somebody who's looking over to triple check what is being given out. So for instance, if you ask AI to summarize a paper that doesn't, and you ask it to cite a journal, it may give you one that doesn't exist. And when this happens and people are putting this out, so if they get published or they don't acknowledge it, this undermines credibility of researchers and the integrity of our work that is often built, has been built over time. And talked a little bit about reproducibility challenges as these AI tools kind of evolve over time. There's it's gathering information, kind of what was shared is that anything that we're doing is kind of being added to this AI, especially with those terms of agreement. Uh, so what does that mean? It means that the information that it has today could very well be changing this very second if we asked it again tomorrow. And if people are using this for their research, then we're really thinking about these long-term projects where they may be, using something that was generated by AI, but then it may be inconsistent later on.
Stephanie, take a sip of tea.
And
One more slide here.
oh, me? Oh, go ahead.
That's you.
So the last one is equity, bias, and access. So let's take a moment to consider how equity plays a role. One of the examples that I was given was if you put in a salary into, like if you ask ChatGPT or any AI model, here's two exact same qualified, people, and you just change one is male and one is female, you'll get completely different salaries, substantially like $40,000-$50,000 differences, with everything else being the same. What does this mean? Um, that's kind of more the bias. But when we think about students, not all students have access to these premium AI tools. They cost. And if you're not paying for a premium, then your data is more than likely being used. We also have this digital literacy where students are coming in with different backgrounds. So maybe in their institutions they had access or training, but others are coming in without that. And so if we're asking students to use them, not just in research, but in communication or, if we're thinking for them to use this for their preparing for the careers, it's going to be harder. So when we think about how is this integrated into academic spaces, this is really going to be leading into this inequity piece. So we really need to be thinking about how are we training students? How do students have access, given that institutions have different levels of funding that they're putting towards it. Like I said, our university is leaned in, but maybe others have not. And that also varies by professor. So something to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, the ways in which a lot of these tools are biased or present a lack of equity. I mean, it reminds me of the case a couple of years ago with Google Images, where you put in the prompt and said, "Show me pictures of doctors," and it just gave you a whole page of white men in lab coats. They since have fixed that. There is a very good study most of you are probably familiar with. I can't remember the author, so somebody drop it in the chat, please. But I think the book is called Algorithms of Oppression, which was a study of this very issue from a couple of years back. So next is institutional and policy concerns, right? I mean, universities, departments lacking clear policies on acceptable AI use. This is what we're talking about, is trying to establish some kind of policy that works and that makes sense. That may be really difficult to do at an institutional level. I'm eager to see what people are dropping into that Google Doc. It is more likely being done at a departmental or programmatic level. We are particularly here today to think about how we might look at this from the perspective of undergraduate research programs and offices. Currently, my office does not have a statement about it. The only thing that we ask is that if students use it, they provide evidence, but we don't really have anything more than that. But that I just put in there last year, and of course this is evolving. There is the burden on the supervisor, on the faculty mentor, the PI, to evaluate AI influenced work, and really help students understand the ethical and appropriate use. And then, of course, there's the compliance issue. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of journals have evolving requirements about using AI, and funding agencies, we're starting to see that now, at least the ones that still exist and still fund, are also starting to include statements about what is permissible and not in using AI in both proposals and projects. Steph, I think you've got the last slide here on ethics.
Yeah, so this is bringing up for a lot of people, kind of as we started out, a lot of ethical and philosophical questions. When we some of the things to think about are authorship versus agency. Can or should AI be treated as a co-author? One of the things that I heard was treating AI kind of as an advanced graduate student or a beginning graduate student. They may be excited to help but may not have all the right information, and that's where kind of the expert comes in to check. There's this question of, is this devaluing human creativity? Is this causing problems? We heard about the article that came out thinking about, the impact that it has to use AI, who uses it, how you use it. But it's going to continue to contribute more and more. And so, this is just kind of this question to keep in the back of our mind. Is our originality or creativity being diminished? We could argue either way for that. And then the long-term impact, because AI changes, right? And like I said, it changes daily, and even as more information is given, this is going to have major impacts on scholarship and research. It already is making a difference. And so, I think this is a very personal choice. At least I was in a conversation yesterday where somebody shared that they didn't want to use AI, and they were kind of my age, mid-30s, and they just like, I want my hands off of it. But then they see other people using it and they're like, should I be using this? How do I use it? And so we're really digging in and having conversations about and being transparent. How do I use AI daily, so that others can learn? Or how should I not be using AI, and when should I not put information in? So I think we're going to continue to have these conversations. And I know David is eager to open it up to the group, so I'll pass
Yeah.
it back to him.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is I think I keep saying about appropriate and ethical use, right? I like Ethan Mollick's approach to this. His book is called Co-Intelligence, and he views AI as being a co-intelligence. It works beside us. It works with us as an assistant. And I kind of like that approach to it. There are lots of books that are constantly coming out every day, it seems. I'm reading a new one now called How to Think About AI by Richard Susskind, which is also so far quite good. And he is of the attitude, as Stephanie says, also, we really just can't stick our heads in the sand over this. It's not going away. And so, what do we do? How do we make sure that our students, that our colleagues are using it in a way that is both ethical and appropriate? And so what I'm going to do is I am going to open us up now for some comments, questions. Um, what are your thoughts on this? Um, and we have a couple folks who've dropped things into the Google Doc. Please continue to do that. I think it's really helpful if we can see what other folks are doing. That's part of the point of these exchanges. Um, how many folks do have established policies already at their institution, at an institutional level? And maybe just show by raise of hands here. So not many, not many, a few. Um, And would any of you who do have that like to talk a little bit about how that policy was arrived at? Because this is, this is a policy which really does in many ways become very discipline specific. How you use it will be approached differently depending on your area. And I'm interested in how a university is able to establish a blanket policy. Um, JJ, you want to talk about that at Purdue, that it's a guideline more than a policy?
Yeah, so we had so faculty got together and talked quite a bit about what does this look like in classrooms in regards to assignments, in regards to research. And they're they just started talking about from a marketing perspective. But it was decided that a policy is probably too stringent, especially given the differences in our disciplines, that AI use varies based on disciplines. And so they provided quite a bit of guidance on what you should do, what you should not do. And so I included it in the Google Doc, but I think it's a very good from a teaching and learning perspective. And we pulled that for our conference AI guidance. But they kind of lay out how should you approach it. It addressed quite a few of the topics that was brought up here, but they decided a guideline is better, and then each researcher and each faculty member and instructor decides how they apply it.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. One of the problems that comes up whenever you develop a policy, quote unquote, or a guideline, quote unquote, is how then you enforce it, right? And I mean that's why I ended up with the final bit in my syllabus statement is, if I suspect that you've used it, the burden of proof is on you to show me how you used it. And if you didn't use it, that you didn't use it. So it's encouraging students to keep clearer records of their research process and what they're going through and what they're doing and documenting so that they can present that if they're called on it. Because I've been told that over 60% of our academic violations last year, the charges that were brought to the committee involved AI. Now, I don't know what percentage of those ended up being decided as being actually in the wrong. But 60% of the ones that faculty filed were AI related last year. Other thoughts or comments?
Hi, my keyboard, this is Dee. My keyboard has quit connecting to my computer, so I'm just going to go ahead and say this. One of the things we have is an email, and it's an extensive policy. I put it in the share drive, but we have to reach out to students by telephone and say it appears that you have used AI, blah, blah, blah. But let me know. Did you use it? If so, how? And we found that most of them will come clean and say if they did or did not.
And is there a potential punishment for that, for lack of another way of putting it?
Well, if they, it depends, and yes, there is punishment for it. But if they did use AI and other than to look up ideas and to actually write the paper, then they have to come back, and the professor has to make a decision. Do you punish them by turning them over to academic dishonesty, or do you give them the option to redo the assignment? And we're only having 8-week semester, so it's really tight.
Yeah.
So it's totally up to the professors at that point. But we also have the ability to see, are they a multi-time offender or not?
Right.
And so if they've been caught doing stuff like this in the past, then it's much easier just to turn it over to the department that handles that and let them make the final decision.
Yeah, I think, I mean, part of our goal with doing this presentation today and with the information we have on the slides is not to present a policy. It's to present the things that we need to consider in drawing up some kind of a policy or guideline. And I think that can be useful. I mean, that's what I'm going to set out to work on now for my office and hope to have in place by the spring. I really don't know what it's going to look like. I really don't, because as I say, The problem for me is just how does it work across disciplines? My office serves the entire institution. So how do I draw up a policy that will apply for students who are doing research in theater and people who are doing research in neuroscience equally? I don't know. If anybody has any ideas on that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, David, I think it kind of the approach at OSU has been, uh, there's some general kind of policy at the top level of like, it's really giving people the choice to choose how they want to engage. And so I think that's why our syllabi are extremely important and what we say, what we expect in our class, and students have to follow those expectations. They kind of become mini contractors. They kind of have to make sure that they're following the rules for every single class or person that they're working with. And so I think you can, I mean, if you're doing it for your office, then I would say this applies to my office and not necessarily across campus because your policy may be, on one side or the other or in the middle, and somebody may be completely hands off AI and people are changing how they approach their assignments for their learning outcomes. So I think as long as you're clear, you can really make whatever policy you want for your space as long as the institution has allowed for that, because again, like I said, OSU is really like we're on board with AI. We're going to be kind of leaders and pioneers in that, and they kind of think of it as using the calculator of like the same kind of thing for every generation. There's always been something. It was the computer that came out, and if people didn't learn the computers back in the 70s, like they would be lost today, right? And so it's
Mm,
this thinking about adaptation to incorporate it in an ethical way. There's ideas of like, what should we not be putting into chat that is, sensitive information? So it's really about training students to think critically, like, is this safe to put out? And that's why these subscriptions to the services matter, and reading and like setting up those settings, kind of what Sherry was pointing out, right? And I think it's kind of all of our jobs. The library is a central place where students are getting this information. And I think even our library is maybe teaching like how to use AI to search for articles, like AI Rabbit, for instance, which pulls a bunch of information. So AI has been incorporated. I think it's more of how are we going to assess it with our students, right? Is that kind of what we're asking right now?
yeah. Yeah. Emily, if you could put that link to the Temple statement into the document, that would really be helpful. Um, JJ, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, any policy that you said, as you say there, that states that they shouldn't use AI at all, may not be inclusive of what researchers are expecting. There's got to be a middle ground here, and I think that's what we're all trying to navigate. It's not an all or nothing. And so, I certainly have colleagues who are running around like their hair's on fire saying this is the end of the world. And no one should use it, and they're forbidding their students from using it. And I've been telling them, we already had students graduating last May who were being asked about their use of AI in grad school interviews and in job interviews. And if the response is we weren't allowed to use it, guess what's going to happen to their application? It's foolhardy. And, I mean, yeah, it may be frightening for some of us, particularly in some disciplines. But we got to get a grasp on it, and we got to stop, I think, reacting just emotionally to this and have a discussion, which is what we're doing here. Really helpful discussion, a rational discussion about it. It's here. What do we do? Other thoughts?
Hey, David, if I could add something. I'm in a very similar situation to you. So like we are in a centralized office that serves the entire university. And our university is like, it's the year of AI empowerment. So we're supposed to be embracing this. And yet when I started digging into it over and over and over again, the students were like, I want guidelines. I want some sort of
Yeah,
direction because they're terrified of getting in trouble, just like you
yeah,
mentioned with your daughter. And so I couldn't put any kind of like statement out that was a one size fits all. It had to be very general and vague of like, sometimes it makes sense to use it and sometimes it doesn't. And you have to make sure you're using it responsibly and check with your mentor on what's appropriate within your field,
right.
to be able to like kind of do this blanket thing. But I think our responsibility, if we can't say one way or the other, and we can't dictate to faculty like what they are willing to accept or willing to have students do, is we have to do our best to train students within our programs like how to use it responsibly. And with the caveat that this is not the only option. This is not only
Right.
for, the only way that it can be done, but you're absolutely right. Like students are not getting jobs because we're not training them. They're 3 years behind graduating right now because we're not embracing it, and we can't enforce it for everyone across the board. So we have to do what we can within our programs to get people.
Tina, remind us what school you're at.
Northern Arizona University.
Thank you. And I see my friend Billy Gunnels on the screen. Billy.
Yeah, I was just sort of following up with what I was hearing. And I'm sure other people are doing this, but one of the things I've done with all my students, both in the research lab as well as in the class, is we come up with an AI policy statement for ourselves. So I introduce them to AI for a few weeks, and then after that, we come up with a decision about how we're going to use it, what we're going to do with it, how we actually cite it, and how we make decisions about it. All of that is obviously followed up with the expectation of they should not take those guidelines and assume that that applies in anyone else's labs or
Right.
anyone else's classes, because there's such a tremendous amount of variation. And one of the comments I think you made earlier, David, too many of my colleagues think that they actually have valid information from an AI detector, and we have a lot of false positive accusations going on the
Yeah.
campus, which is creating a deep sense of distrust from the students and the faculty.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I've talked with my research students about it and asked them whether they've used it, the majority of them say they've kind of played with it a little bit, but they haven't really used it in any kind of deep way. But I have a whole bunch of them who seem like, evangelical about not using it. And I mean, they've obviously been convinced that it's the devil incarnate. And oh no, I'm not doing that. And I just don't think that's a good idea. Thomas asks how much detail we expect when we ask students to document AI use. It seems like it could be consuming. I mean, I'm pretty simple about it. I have them, if they've used an AI platform to do part of a project or part of an essay, they need to cite, there needs to be a note there that says that they used it. I ask them to put the prompt in. What did you ask the AI to do? And in most cases, that's been very helpful to me because students will put in, I asked AI to improve this paragraph. I asked AI to make the flow better of this. Or I asked AI for a data set on, diabetes occurrence in the US in the 2010s. And, sure to instruct them ahead of time that they need to double check all of that. As Sherry says, it's saving chat transcripts is simple, but you do have to log in, right? If you don't log in and establish an account, it won't save the chat transcripts. It won't remember you when you come back. Cheryl says they're inviting in a psych department a faculty member to be an AI educational strategist. Is anyone else doing that? We here had announced that AI was going to be our next QEP until we were informed on Friday that SAC COC is actually stopping the QEPs and they are no longer going to be a part of accreditation. But we are going forward with it because it's so important. So we have a whole team on campus working on this. Is anyone using AI to review or score UR proposals? Tim O'Neill asks. Crickets.
Oh,
Tim, are you?
no. I was actually, Tim beat me to it. I can't type as fast as Tim, and I was actually doing this in a slightly different way, which was potentially a shift in the conversation. And I don't know if we're ready for this, but that was going to be my question somewhere along those lines is, has anyone shifted, change it, is to using where many of us, I'm sure, are in relatively small offices, short staffed with large numbers. Like I'm staring down next week, probably having 500 student applications for our spring semester, and a staff of 2 of us that can read applications and review them, right? So I've been working a lot on taking the rubric that we use and transforming it as something that's more AI friendly and trying to pilot and play with like, how can I bin applications to focus my attention, right? Likewise, when it comes to abstract reviews for conferences, and we've got 300 of them, and we tend to, kind of focus on certain ones that need revisions, right? Are there ways to use AI to sort those, to like make our work manageable and scalable, particularly at a larger institution? Are folks there yet? I mean, that's what I'm curious about.
I think those are really, really pertinent questions. I've been reading a lot of articles in the last couple of months about journals that are suggesting that they start using AI for peer reviews of submissions, because there's such a problem with finding people to do peer review these days that AI seems like the logical place to go for this. There are mixed results and mixed feelings about it. Lance?
Resumes for people who are out there trying to find a job right now.
Right, right. Yes. I mean, it is a resume builder to be sure. But there, it's a real problem. Tim says the potential to reduce bias by using AI in proposal review, but then the flip side of that is also it could increase it. We don't know, because it's all going to depend on what prompt you put in and how you phrase whatever you're asking it to do. And that's why it seems just so important. I mean, early on, it's funny to talk about early on about something that is still a toddler. But early on in this AI discussion, when ChatGPT first popped up a couple of years ago, everybody was talking about, oh, you got to learn how to do prompt engineering, prompt engineering. There were books coming out of prompt engineering. And, there still is something to that. So Julie at MSU says we use faculty in the disciplines to review and score the proposals. They usually spot issues that are AI based, but they haven't yet had a problem. And then Sherry asks if you'd be informing applicants that you'll be using AI to review proposals and submissions. I would think that you would have to disclose that. You would have to disclose that.
Yeah, I would think you would have to disclose it.
But then if your policy is you can't use AI in your proposals, how does that look? You can't use it, but we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's a quagmire. It really is.
Yeah, I had shared with you, David and Sherry, the other day, which is in our application, the questions that we're asking. So in addition to the written portion, we're asking, are you currently in any other support programs? So EIP, CAMP, LSAMP, if you have them, right? Have you or your family ever qualified for any of the any financial assistance programs, SNAP, Pell Grant, free or reduced lunch, other? First gen, obviously, and then are you from a rural or isolated community, typically more than 25 miles from a population center, or and disconnected from major urban centers? Are you a veteran? Are you a parent or caregiver? And using those questions to kind of filter out, and if those students meet additional criteria, then that can reduce the number of applications that you may have to review, especially if you're prioritizing just certain things. So it's like, we have a huge policy at OSU to support veterans, just like most hiring companies. And so if they have a military connection, that's something we're considering. I'm just thinking if there's ways to incorporate different questions to get different answers that maybe our internal systems are not kind of naturally set up to catch. And that way we can reduce the amount of work, because 500 applications for one person is high. I do 370 and by myself, and that's high. And so I have to find ways to cut it down, and that's the way I've done it, is trying to prioritize. And then at the end, when I'm making those harder decisions, then I'm reading through and using our rubric, and asking. I have an additional question that's like, is this like I call it a diversity point, but it's just like an additional point if they meet any criteria. Women in engineering, the things that I mentioned, I just give them an extra point, and those are the students I'm considering. Some students share mental health issues. I'm like, I want to consider, disabilities. And so, yeah, I can share those. I'll pull them in a document. But yeah, so I don't know if that's the answer to everyone's problem, but I just think that it could be something we could do.
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because on the one hand, I could see, oh, well, I'll use AI to review, Lance, God love you, 500 applications. And then you do that and everything seems hunky-dory. And then you go to the administration and say, I really need another staff position. And they say, for what? You say, well, I need help with applications. You say, well, just use AI. And so I think that's one of our fears is that, it will be looked at as a cost-cutting measure.
Yeah, especially here where we're like Stephanie describes an institution that's embracing it in a lot of ways. And so and I try to put our policy page in there, but when I went to it, it now says TBD. So I don't know what happened to it. They had put this big announcement out back in August with all this information. So copied a couple things and put in there, but it's not all there. But yeah, I hear you. It's the it's the same piece of, be more efficient. Right now I just have a bunch of stories of failing, like all of my little pilot tests. We score, I score a bunch by a human, then kind of compare how does the AI do. And it was kind of funny because we have certain AIs that at our institution that we're logged into, and because we pay for the subscription as an institution or whatever, it's supposed to be firewalled, and that's following our training that we have from IT to use these certain ones and stuff like that. And I get into them, and it's like if I give it one application, it does pretty well, usually within a point of what a human would do it. And then I give it a spreadsheet, and it gives them all the same score.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And I'd be like, hey, wait, here's your reference point, right? So we've been trying to use reference points of human engagement and things like that to kind of train what we're supposed to be using internally with those sort of sensitive data pieces to actually help us. And so far I'm failing, but I am not trained in this, right? Like I'm fumbling through it like everybody else who is not a computer scientist. So that's what I'm curious about. And I see Tim is saying that he hasn't gone down that rabbit hole yet, but is, yeah.
Well, and someone mentioned earlier that students want a policy. And we got to remember that this is a generation of students who grew up with rubrics. They had rubrics for everything. And I mean, I don't use rubrics in my classes, and it drives my students nuts. They say, well, what's the rubric? And I say, there is no rubric. I don't use them now. I'm in the humanities, so it's a little bit different the way that I work. But, this is a generation that wants those clear guidelines. And, in most cases, it seems to me as we look across the landscape, we're not really doing a good job of presenting them with those guidelines. I can tell you one place that I'll be using AI after this call, which is that article that Sherry mentioned, the MIT article about your brain on ChatGPT, because the PDF of it is 206 pages long. I ain't reading that. I'm putting it into AI and saying, summarize this for me and give me the salient points. Also, because it's going to be a lot of probably neuroscience jargon that I'm not going to understand. So, I will ask ChatGPT or Gemini and I'll say, summarize this for someone who is not a specialist in this area, give it those qualifications and see how it does. And then I'll talk to Sherry and see if I got any of it right.
Just make sure that you put it in the institutional Gemini and not in the
Yeah.
open chat GPT.
Yes.
I will say one of the places I did have success is we recently ran a mini grants program where we did have those faculty subject matter expert reviewers. And I was not comfortable sharing, verbatim reviews with the students because it was their professors and in some cases the mentor of the student, the colleagues reviewing them. And so using AI to create a consistent structure of the summary of every single set of reviews so that the structure was exactly the same, with the same number of sentences in each paragraph, the whole thing for every single student. Once I figured out how to get it to that point and then just copying and pasting in, and that was really nice to be able to spit those out really quickly and me not have to write a bunch of summaries,
Yeah.
be able to articulate it to the students in a somewhat anonymized way.
So you felt that really worked for you.
Yeah, it actually worked really well.
That's great. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Todd to include a link to this Google Doc, which now is ended up being a pretty large doc and pretty nice compilation of information with all the folks who pre-registered. So you'll get it with the video link. We'll also post it in the Kerr community. I want to thank everybody for participating in today's URP exchange. Sincere thanks to our terrific facilitators, Stephanie Ramos, Oregon State, Sherry Mattis at Christopher Newport, and me. And thanks to Kerr and especially to Todd Wagner for all his tech support. Join us next month for our next exchange, which will be November 12th, when we'll discuss working with development, advancement, and donors for UR. I am subtitling that one, How to Have a Bake Sale. That will take place on Wednesday, November 12th at noon Eastern, and a career registration link will be sent out real soon. And I hope everybody has a terrific day. Thank you all.